Have you ever felt like your mind is full of information but empty of real understanding? Like you see a lot, you hear a lot, you scroll a lot, but you don't really think anymore. When was the last time you sat in silence and followed one idea deeply? Are we thinking less than before? Are we thinking at all? And do we even notice it? We live in a world where information never stops. From the moment we wake up, information starts pouring in. Messages, videos, conversations, work, books, entertainment. And it continues all day until we sleep. Yes, our brain is always busy. But here's the question. Are we actually thinking? Because it feels like we are learning. It feels like we're growing. But what if that feeling is just an illusion? Because real thinking takes time. It needs silence. It needs space. But our minds don't get that anymore. Instead, we keep pouring more and more data into our brains. At some point, nothing new fits. Everything just spills over, and slowly, something changes. We stop going deep. We stop asking hard questions. We stop forming our own thoughts. We become shallow. Our brain is not designed for constant input. It actually needs breaks to work properly. But if we remove breaks, we remove thinking. Let me explain. Imagine an artificial intelligence model. First, you give it a huge amount of information. Books, text, images, videos, everything. Then it goes through a training phase. It doesn't just store the data like a hard drive. It repeatedly processes the data and adjusts billions of internal parameters, often called weights. Those weights are numerical values that represent the patterns the model has learned. These weights are like experience. They decide how the model responds later. So when you ask the AI a question, it just doesn't go back and read all the raw data again. No. It uses the processed understanding, the trained knowledge. That's what makes the answer useful and meaningful. But here's the important part. That understanding only exists because of time, training time. Without it, there is only raw data, nothing structured, nothing meaningful. Now, let's come back to us. Every day, from the moment we wake up, we are doing something similar to feeding an AI model. We scroll through news, we talk to people, we work, we watch videos, we read messages, we learn. And we call it productivity. But here's the question nobody asks. Where is our training time? When do we sit and process everything we consume? When do we turn raw information into real understanding? Because if we think about it, well, most of the time we don't. We just keep adding more data, more input. And slowly our brain starts acting like an untrained model. It has all the raw information, but not enough time to organize it, to connect it, to filter it. So when we make decisions or form opinions or think about life, we often are not using the deep understanding. We are using whatever is on the surface, whatever is the most recent, whatever is loudest. It's like eating food all day, but never letting your body to digest it. Eventually it becomes uncomfortable, heavy, and confusing. The brain needs time to process, time to organize, time to build those weights. Without that time, everything stays raw, unstructured, disconnected. And that can affect something very important. Our decisions, our beliefs, our sense of direction in life. Because if your thinking is based on unprocessed data, then your decisions are also unprocessed. And maybe that's why many people feel lost today. Not because they don't have information, but because they have too much of it. We don't have the training time in our lives. We filled every gap, every pause, every empty moment with more input. We know more, but we understand less. Thinking is not about how much you consume, it's about how deeply you understand. So if your mind feels full but your thinking feels unclear, maybe the problem is not lack of information, maybe it's lack of processing time. A mind without processing time is just raw data in motion. And when that happens, we start to outsource thinking. Outsourced thinking. At first, it doesn't even sound dangerous. In fact, outsourcing is usually seen as smart. Businesses outsource tasks all the time, because it saves time, it reduces effort, it increases efficiency. Instead of doing everything internally, they let other systems or people handle parts of the process. And honestly, that works well in business. But the real question is, can the same logic be applied to the human mind? Because unlike a company, the brain is not just trying to produce results as fast as possible. The brain is supposed to understand, to judge, filter, and decide what actually matters. Imagine a company that decides to outsource its management. It eventually lets outsiders define its priorities, make its decisions, and set its direction. So to understand why outsourced thinking is dangerous, we first need to understand what thinking is actually for. Think about a normal decision that is supposed to happen. First, we gather information from different sources, experiences, conversations, books, videos, observations, emotions, memories. All of these become inputs. Then come the most important part, the thinking process. This is where the brain filters information. It compares ideas, it organizes them, it questions them, it connects patterns, it removes contradictions, and it forms conclusions. And only after that process do we make decisions. Then our actions follow those decisions. So basically, our actions are not supposed to come directly from information. They're supposed to come from processed understanding. Thinking is the filter between the world and your actions. Now imagine removing that filter or weakening it. What happens then? The information still enters your brain, but it no longer gets processed deeply enough. It stays raw, unfiltered, unorganized. And if the brain does not properly process information, then your decisions are no longer based on understanding. They're based on exposure. This is a massive difference, because now whatever enters your mind most often starts shaping your behavior automatically. Not because you consciously accepted it, not because you deeply believed in it, but simply because it was repeated enough. And this is where outsourced thinking begins. Instead of thinking through ideas ourselves, we slowly allow external systems to think for us. Algorithms decide what we see, trends decide what we talk about, social media decides what feels important, news cycles decide what deserves our attention, online culture decides what is acceptable or unacceptable. And because our minds are overloaded with constant input, we often do not stop long enough to question any of it. We simply absorb, react, and move on. So the thinking process gets skipped. And when the thinking process disappears, the filter disappears too. At that point, your mind becomes less like an active decision maker and more like a surface, constantly being written by outside forces. And the scary part is that it feels normal. You still feel like you are making your own choices. You still feel independent. But many of your thoughts may simply be the result of repeated exposure. That means your decisions, your actions, your worldview may no longer fully belong to you. This might explain why so many people today feel disconnected from themselves. One of the most interesting things about humans is that none of us are truly the same. We are born with different personalities, different emotional patterns, different interests, different fears and different talents, different ways of seeing the world. And a huge part of those differences come from the thinking process itself. Because thinking is not only about making decisions. Thinking shapes identity. But here's the problem. The more shallow our thinking becomes, the more shallow we become. And when you outsource thinking for too long, something dangerous starts happening. You slowly stop becoming yourself. Instead, you start becoming a reflection of the environment around you. You follow trends because everyone follows them. You chase goals because they feel right. You adopt opinions because they are repeated enough. You pursue paths that society rewards. Many people never stop and ask the most important questions. Do I actually want this? What do I really want in life? What is right or wrong for me? And the scary thing is that many people genuinely do not know anymore because they never had enough silence to think deeply about their own lives. Their mind became too crowded with outside inputs, so instead of building an identity from within, they slowly absorb one from outside. And this is happening more and more today. People are becoming similar to each other in strange ways. Not physically, mentally, emotionally, behaviorally. Trends move so fast that people no longer have time to ask whether they truly connect with something before adopting it. And over time, individuality starts fading. Not completely, but enough to notice. It becomes harder to find people who deeply know who they are. People who chose their path consciously. People whose goals truly come from inside themselves rather than from constant exposure. And honestly, many modern goals are not even fully ours anymore. They are socially downloaded ambitions. Someone sees a lifestyle online and suddenly wants it. Someone sees a trend and suddenly adopts it. Someone sees a society rewarding a certain path and immediately starts working toward it without deeply questioning why. Maybe that path is correct for them and maybe it isn't, but the problem is not choosing common goals. The problem is choosing them unconsciously. Because when you stop thinking deeply, you stop distinguishing between what you truly want and what the world trained you to want. And eventually, life starts feeling strange. You move forward, but without clarity. You achieve things, but you still feel empty because deep down, part of you knows something important. You never fully chose this path yourself. And maybe this is why so many people feel disconnected from their own identity today. Not because individuality disappeared naturally, but because constant information overload weakened the brain's filtering process. The mind no longer gets enough quiet time to properly process experiences, values, emotions, and desires. So instead of building a strong inner world, many people live mostly through external influence. And here's the irony. humans were never supposed to all become the same. Difference is actually part of human strength. Think about a great TV show. Imagine if every character thought the same way, wanted the same things, acted the same, and reacted the same. That would be boring. Nobody would watch it. The story would feel dead. What makes the stories interesting is contrast. Different personalities, motivations, perspectives. And real life is supposed to work the same way. Humanity becomes richer when people develop unique ways of thinking and living. Without deep thinking, people drift toward the easiest available identity, the most rewarded identity, the most repeated identity. And social systems love that, because predictable people are easier to influence, easier to market to guide. But a person who truly thinks deeply becomes harder to control because they question things, they pause, they reflect, they ask themselves, why do I believe this? Why do I want this? Who benefits from my attention? And is this truly me? Those questions are becoming rare today because modern life leaves almost no empty space for them. Every quiet moment gets filled instantly, and the brain never fully catches up. So the mental filter becomes weaker and weaker over time. And when the filter weakens, outside inputs gain more direct access to shaping behavior. This is why sometimes it becomes difficult to tell whether our decisions are truly ours or whether they were slowly planted there by repetitions, by algorithms, trends, and constant exposure. And that is one of the biggest invisible struggles of modern life. Not losing information, but losing ourselves in it. But what actually caused this problem? Did we create it ourselves? Were past generations somehow smarter than we are today? When we look at older generations, many people appear calmer, more focused, more certain about what they wanted in life. They often seem to have stronger attention spans and a clear sense of direction. So it is natural to ask, did they simply have better brains? Well, the answer is not really. From what science tells us, the human brain has not changed significantly in just a few generations. Our brains today are essentially the same as of those who lived hundreds or even thousands of years ago. The structure is the same. The basic cognitive abilities are the same. The capacity for intelligence, creativity, and deep thought is still there. So, if the brain itself has not changed much, then the main difference must be somewhere else. And there are really two factors to consider: the brain itself and the amount of information it receives. The first factor has remained relatively stable. The second factor, though, has changed dramatically. For most of human history, information was scarce. If you wanted to master a skill, you often had to search for someone who knew more than you. In some cases, that meant traveling for weeks, months, or even across continents just to learn from the right teacher. If you wanted news, you traveled slowly. If you wanted new ideas, you often had to find a book or attend a lecture or speak to someone knowledgeable. New information came in small amounts, and there were long periods of ordinary life in between. People spend much of their day doing repetitive tasks, farming, cooking, walking, repairing things, or simply sitting with their thoughts. Then over time, information became easier to access. Books became more common, newspapers spread widely, radio connected people to the world, television brought news and entertainment into the home. And this was a major change, but it was still limited. You watched the program at a specific time, you read one newspaper, and then the information stopped. That is why many people look back at the 1980s and 1990s with a certain warmth. Of course, those decades had their own problems, and nostalgia often makes the past seem better than it was. But there may be some truth about that feeling. For many people, the amount of information during those years was stimulating without being overwhelming. There was enough input to stay informed and entertained, but there were still many quiet moments built into daily life. Life for many people felt less fragmented. Communication was slower, work usually stayed at work, entertainment was limited, and when a TV show ended or the newspaper was finished, there was often nothing demanding your attention. The brain had time to absorb what it experienced. In that sense, the balance may have been closer to what our minds can comfortably handle. Even people who were born later often feel a sense of comfort when they watch movies or videos from the 1980s and 1990s. Part of that feeling comes from aesthetics and culture, of course, but part of it may also come from seeing a lifestyle that appears calmer and less saturated with constant input. Then came the internet, and then later smartphones and social media. For the first time in history, information stopped being something we access occasionally. It became something that surrounded us all the time. News updates every minute, endless videos, constant messages, recommendations designed to keep us engaged, a never-ending stream of opinions, entertainment, and emotional triggers. The issue is not that this information is inherently bad. The issue is that the volume and speed of input increased much faster than our habits for processing it. Our brains are still powerful, but they were not designed for continuous stimulation without pause. So, no, the previous generations were not necessarily smarter, and the 80s and 90s were not a perfect golden age. But people in those periods often lived in environments with fewer interruptions and more natural opportunities for reflection. Today, the challenge is different. We have access to more knowledge than any generation in history, but we also face more competition for our attention than any generation before us. And that may be the central issue. When the amount of input consistently exceeds our ability to process it, understanding becomes shallow. Decisions become more automatic, and it becomes harder to know which thoughts are truly our own. We are living in a world that constantly demands our attention while giving us fewer and fewer opportunities to think in peace. And that means the solution is not to wish for an older era, it is to consciously create space for reflection in the world we live in now. Because the ability to think deeply is still there. It just needs time, silence, and attention to come alive. Maybe this is one reason why there are so many criticisms of Generation Z. People often say they have shortened attention spans, struggle to focus, and move quickly from one trend to the next. They are sometimes described as changing identities depending on what is popular, adopting goals that feel attractive in the moment and abandoning them just as quickly. But there is a real environmental difference. Generation Z grew up during the most intense period of information exposure in human history. Unlike previous generations, they did not gradually adapt to smartphones, social media, and algorithm-driven content. They were born into it. Their brains developed in a world where attention was constantly being competed for. So if many young people struggle with focus or clarity, it is not because their genes change or because they are inherently less capable. It is because they happen to live at the peak of what we might call the input overload era. And to be fair, this is not their fault. Humanity created a new environment faster than it learned how to live with it. We built systems designed to capture attention, but we have not yet developed widespread habits for protecting our thinking. That is why this issue is unlikely to solve itself. The core factors have not changed. The human brain remains the same. The amount of information continues to grow. Artificial intelligence, it can accelerate this trend. It can produce enormous amounts of personalized content, opinions, and recommendations at a scale never seen before. It can make outsourced thinking even easier. Instead of reflecting on our own ideas, we may become increasingly dependent on machine-generated answers that are optimized for specific goals. If that happens, without conscious effort on our part, there is a risk that the mental filter becomes weaker and weaker. And when the filter disappears, decisions may feel personal while being largely shaped by external systems. That is why the challenge facing Generation Z is also the challenge facing every generation that follows. Unless we actively create a space for reflection, the problem will continue. The future question is not whether technology will think for us, it is whether we will continue practicing the ability to think for ourselves. So what should we do? In a world where information is available on demand, 24 hours a day, and where our minds are constantly exposed to more input that they can naturally process, what is the practical solution? The answer is simple. We take control. Human beings have done this many times before. Whenever the environment changed in a way that no longer matched our natural needs, we created habits to restore balance. Take physical activity as an example. For most of human history, daily life required movement. People walked long distances, carried things, built things, and worked with their bodies. Exercise was not something you had to schedule, it happened automatically as a part of life. But modern life changed that. Today, many people can spend entire days sitting. So what did we do? We created exercise. We set aside a specific time to move our bodies on purpose. We turned something that used to happen naturally into a deliberate practice. The same thing happened with food. In the past, food was limited. Today, many people have access to more calories than they need. That can easily lead to obesity and poor health. So what do people do? They become intentional. They create diets. They track what they eat. They choose what to consume. In both cases, the pattern is the same. When the environment changes, unconscious habits are no longer enough. We need conscious systems. And now we face the same challenge with our minds. For most of history, mental downtime happened naturally. There were pauses between information, periods of silence, long stretches of uninterrupted thought. The brain had time to process what it absorbed. Today, that no longer happens automatically. The flow of information is effectively endless. And unlike previous eras, there is no natural stopping point. So the question is not whether information will slow down, it will not. The question is whether we will build systems to protect our thinking. Some people suggest extreme solutions. Delete social media, stop watching news, disconnect from technology. Those approaches may help temporarily, but they are not realistic for most people. Technology is part of modern life. It creates opportunities to learn, to work, to connect, to build. The goal is not to escape the world. The goal is to engage with it intentionally. And it is important to understand that overload does not come only from entertainment or social media. Even productive activities can overwhelm the mind. Reading books all day, studying continuously, working without breaks, listening to podcasts while multitasking, learning non-stop. All of that can overload the brain if there is no time to process it. We are dealing with something close to an infinite stream of information. You cannot solve that by shutting off one source and assuming the problem is gone. You close one pipe, the flow continues through countless others. So what do we actually need? We need the mental equivalent of exercise and diet. In other words, we need to set aside a specific time each day to be completely unplugged. A time when the only thing you are supposed to do is, nothing. That may sound simple, but if you try it, you will quickly realize it is much harder than it seems. Here's the practice. Set a timer for 30 to 60 minutes. Go to a quiet place, sit in the chair, and just stare at the wall. No music, no phone, no talking with others, no eating, and no sleeping. Okay, and also this is not a meditation. Your eyes should be open, and you are not trying to silence your thoughts. The goal is to remain awake and alert, but without giving your brain any new inputs. The only optional tool you can have is a pen and paper, in case an important thought comes up and you want to write it down. That's it, nothing else. And what may look like doing nothing is actually one of the most productive things you can do for your mind. Because this is the training phase we talked about. This is where your brain finally gets time to process the information that has been building up. All the conversations, problems, emotions, ideas, goals, all the unanswered questions. All of that is already inside your head. It just has not had enough quiet time to organize itself. When you sit in silence, your mind starts doing what it was designed to do. At first, it may feel uncomfortable. You may feel restless. Your mind may jump from one thought to another. You may feel the urge to do something after just a few minutes. That is normal. In fact, that discomfort is part of the point. It shows how dependent we have become on constant stimulation. Think of it like starting exercise after years of inactivity. The first workout feels difficult, not because the exercise is ineffective, but because your muscles are out of practice. The same is true for our attention and reflection. The more you repeat this habit on a daily basis, the easier it gets. And over time, the benefits can be surprisingly powerful. This practice does not require you to abandon technology. You do not need to delete social media or stop learning. You can still consume large amounts of information from many different sources. The key is that you also give your brain dedicated time to process what it receives. Just as eating well does not mean avoiding food, mental clarity does not mean avoiding information. It means making sure there is enough time to digest it. I know this technique may sound too simple for a problem this important. Just sitting in a room and stare at a wall. That hardly seems like a serious solution, but sometimes the most effective solutions are simple. Maybe not easy, but simple. And the best part is that you can test it yourself. No theory required, no expensive tools, no special knowledge. Just set a timer for 30 minutes. Sit alone in silence and see what that happens. Can you last a full session without reaching for stimulation? Can you stay with your own thoughts? Can you let your mind speak without interruption? If you can, you may discover something many people rarely experience today: your actual thinking. And once you reconnect with that, you may realize that clarity was never missing. It was simply waiting for enough silence to appear. This practice will feel different for every person, and the only real way to understand what this does is to try it yourself. But let me show you what often happens. During the first days, your mind may feel crowded. Thoughts jump from one topic to another. Old conversations appear, random memories surface. Unfinished tasks start demanding attention. It may feel hard to focus on anything for more than a few seconds. And that can make it seem like the practice is not working. But in reality, this is often a sign that the process has already begun. When you finally become still, you will start noticing the mental clutter that has been accumulating in the background. Your job is not to force your thoughts in a specific direction. Your job is to let them move naturally. This is your brain sorting, organizing, and prioritizing what matters. As the days go by, the process often becomes deeper. Thoughts that have been buried for years may return. A problem you ignored a long time ago may suddenly come back to the view. Questions you never gave yourself time to answer may begin asking for attention. And sometimes that can be uncomfortable, because the mind tends to bring forward what is unresolved, not what is convenient. Deep-rooted problems often surface. Issues in relationships, unclear goals, decisions you have been avoiding, parts of yourself you have neglected. These thoughts were never truly gone. Your mind kept them in the background because they were important. You simply never gave them enough uninterrupted time. Then something interesting starts to happen. Connections form, patterns become visible, pieces of the puzzle begin fitting together, and eventually solutions appear. Not always all at once, but often in small moments of clarity. You begin to understand what needs to change, what no longer belongs in your life, what you truly value. After a while, you may notice something you have not felt in a long time: inner clarity. You know what you should do. You know what you should stop doing. You feel less pulled by every trend, opinion, or outside expectation. You become more grounded in your own conclusions. And those conclusions matter because they become the foundation of your life. Your beliefs, your principles, your boundaries, your decisions, and finally, your actions. Whether the topic is relationships, work, politics, personal values, or long-term goals, you no longer carry around only raw information. You carry understanding. And that understanding was not downloaded from someone else. It was built by your own mind. This is when something important happens. You begin to feel like yourself again. Not a copy of what's popular and not a reflection of whatever content you consumed most recently, but a distinct person with your own perspective, your own priorities, and your own direction. You still receive information from the world, you still learn from others, you still adapt, but now information passes through your filter first. You process it, you question it, you shape it to fit your values and goals. And that is where true individuality starts. And that is when you become, your own character, not a copy of what the world expects you to be, not a reflection of the latest trend, not a collection of borrowed opinions, but a unique character with your own mindset, your own values, and your own direction. Like the main character in a great story, you are still influenced by the world around you, but your choices, Your choices come from within. You know what matters to you. You know what you stand for. And you know which path is truly yours. Your decisions become more intentional and your goals become more meaningful. The moment when all the noise begins to settle, you finally hear your own mind again. And that is just the beginning.